Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. Night makes the tower unrecognizable. Once it was glass and light, a place where the horizon never disappeared, but now it's nothing but a dark box balanced above an ocean of silence. No blinking beacons on the runways, no glow from the city skyline, no hum of planes crawling across the sky. Only the wind pressing against the panes and the faint suggestion of movement below. Shadows that never stop shifting, though I know they shouldn't be moving at all. I lean back in the chair that hasn't been comfortable in months, rolling the empty wrapper from nuts between my fingers until the crinkle of plastic scrapes the air. It feels too loud, like I fired a flare into the night, and I freeze with the thing clenched in my fist. My ears wait for an answer. Some echo, some shuffle carried up the stairwell, but nothing comes. Just my own breath. Just the endless quiet that isn't really quiet at all. From up here, the whole place looks dead, but it isn't. Not really. The runways stretch out like grey rivers under the faint moonlight, littered with the still hulks of jets that will never leave this ground. Some of the walking dead drift across the tarmac like debris carried on unseen currents, drawn to nothing and everything at once. Most stay close to the terminals, roaming endlessly between glass walls, trampling abandoned luggage and overturned carts. There's no pattern to them, no reason for where they gather. Sometimes, though, they all move at once, turning in the same direction like a flock. That's when I know something, or someone, has made a mistake out there. I don't talk anymore, not since day 7. In the first few days, I filled the quiet just to keep myself sane, made up fake call signs, whispered phantom clearance codes, anything to keep my voice from rusting away. Erin used to laugh at me for it. She'd sit at the station across from mine, headset dangling loose around her neck, hair always tied up messily like she had better things to do than care about appearances. She was good at this job, calm, sharp, faster than me, with numbers and frequencies. And then, when everything fell apart, she became the only person I had left. Her station is still exactly how she left it. Headset on the armrest, coffee cup dried to a ring on the console, a spiral notebook with the last frantic entries from those final hours when planes were still in the air and we were still pretending control mattered. Page 12 has her handwriting in big, uneven strokes. No more landings. Priority lockdown. The ink bled through the page from pressing too hard. I can't bring myself to touch it, but I also can't throw it away. We really believed the military would come. Maybe not that first night, but soon after. We kept watching the horizon for helicopters, expecting convoys on the perimeter road, rescue teams clearing gates. We thought the control tower was important enough to matter. Every hour, we'd scan the radios for instructions, convinced someone would tell us what to do. Nobody ever did. The last thing I heard on the emergency frequency came on day 4. A voice, probably Air National Guard, heavy with static. All civilian personnel advised to shelter in place until further notice. And then nothing. After that, silence. By day 7, we were running out of water, and the vending machines had been stripped clean. Erin was the one who volunteered to make the first run into Concourse C. She smiled when she said it, tried to make it sound casual, like she wasn't terrified, like we were still co-workers instead of 2 people waiting to starve to death in a glass box. I told her to stay quiet, stay low, and come back before dark. She promised she would. She didn't. She made it back up the stairs an hour later, pale and sweating, clutching a bag of airline snack boxes like she'd won the lottery. She said she scraped her leg on broken glass, that she'd tripped. I wanted to believe her. I didn't understand yet. None of us did. An hour after that, she stopped talking. Her eyes lost focus, her jaw locked, and the sound she made when I shook her awake wasn't human. I had no choice. I keep telling myself that, over and over, but it never sticks. That was 113 days ago. Since then, I've lived in the quiet, rationing my breath like it costs me something. Erin's chair still faces mine. Sometimes I catch myself glancing at it like I expect her to still be there, tapping a pen against her notebook, rolling her eyes when I get a frequency wrong. I always look away fast. The tower creaks when the wind picks up, metal supports shifting in ways I never noticed before power died. Tonight, a loose panel on the roof bangs against steel, irregular and sharp, each gust slamming it harder than the last. It should make me nervous, but it doesn't anymore. If I flinched at every noise this place made, I'd have burned myself out months ago. What still gnaws at me is the food. 2 cans of peaches, 1 packet of almonds, and a nearly empty jug of water. That's all I've got left. I've been putting off another run for days, telling myself I could stretch it just a little longer, but the math doesn't lie. I'll have to go down again. Soon. I dig through my bag for the small flashlight, click it twice. Nothing. Slam it against my palm, twist the cap, shake it. Dead. Another battery drained, and I've only got 1 left after this. I clip the knife to my belt, force myself to look one last time at Erin's chair, and head toward the stairs. The stairwell always feels colder than the rest of the tower, like the air settles here differently. I move slow, rolling heel to toe so my boots don't hit the metal too hard. The sound travels forever in this shaft, and if there's anything waiting below, I don't want to announce myself early. My hand skims the railing out of habit, fingertips brushing smooth aluminum worn down by years of dispatches before me. I wonder how many of them made it home. Probably none. At the base, I stop and press my ear against the steel door. Silence, except for the faint drip of something far away and the occasional creak of settling beams. I grip the handle, inhale, and ease it open just enough to slip through. The terminal beyond feels wrong without power. It used to be alive, buzzing with voices and luggage wheels, and bad announcements echoing from ceiling speakers. Now it's stripped bare, all soft shadows and pale moonlight bleeding through cracked skylights. The wide glass panels of Terminal B throw back faint reflections that move when I do, and every time I catch my own shape, my chest tightens. The place is too open, too exposed. I move between columns, careful with every step, keeping my eyes on the skylights overhead. The walking dead are mostly silent, but their shuffle echoes off the glass in ways that make them impossible to track by sound alone. If you see one, there are usually 3 more you missed. I head toward the food court, keeping low, scanning storefronts. Most of the restaurants are empty now, smashed cabinets and stripped shelves, but there are still scraps tucked away where people gave up searching too early. I'm banking on that tonight. Halfway there, I hear it. The faint scrape of something dragging across tile, coming from near the Hudson News kiosk up ahead. I crouch behind an overturned bench, hand already on the knife, holding still long enough to let my ears work. Silence. Then another shuffle, softer this time, then nothing again. I ease forward until I can see past the bench. Shadows shift near the kiosk. I can't tell if it's wind pushing debris or one of them circling slow, lost in loops like they do when nothing draws them. My fingers ache from gripping the knife too tight, but I stay where I am, waiting. Then the sound fades. The drip of water somewhere above fills the silence, and I let my shoulders loosen just enough to move again. The food court's a mess, but I head for a sandwich shop tucked in the corner. The counters collapsed on one side, glass display cases cracked, and behind the register everything's been ripped open like animals got here before me. I dig carefully through drawers and find a single packet of peanut butter jammed behind a broken utensil tray. It's small, barely worth the risk, but it's food. I slip it into my pocket, turn to check the concourse, and that's when I hear the sharp metallic click of something hitting tile behind me. My body freezes before my brain catches up. The sound came from the far end of the food court, where light from a shattered skylight spills unevenly across the floor. I edge backward, crouched low, until my back presses against the sandwich counter. Then I see them. 2 of the infected, rounding the kiosk in staggered steps, their heads tilted down, faces slack, dried stains trailing down their clothes. They're close enough that I can hear the faint scrape of their bare feet sliding on tile. Their movements are slow, uneven, but deliberate in a way that makes the air around me feel heavier. I hold still, crouched low behind the sandwich counter, breathing through my nose, not daring to let the sound escape too loud. The light from the shattered skylight above paints streaks of pale silver across the food court. One of them steps into the beam, and I see the dried split along its jawline, where flesh once tore open, now stiff and cracked from weeks of air and heat. Its left arm hangs crooked, broken at the elbow, but it still moves without hesitation, shoulders rolling forward with unnatural steadiness. I track its direction, straight toward the kiosk where I came from. The second one lingers further back, tilting its head like it's trying to locate something it isn't sure of yet. I shift my weight slowly, careful not to disturb the loose utensils under my knee. My knife stays firm in my grip, my other hand braced against the sticky floor behind me. There's a narrow service corridor on my right, past the counter, a potential escape if I can slip inside quietly enough. But the sound of a groan breaks the silence before I can make a move. It's faint at first, distant, like something muffled by glass, but it builds. Another answering groan follows almost immediately from inside the coffee shop, and then a shuffle of movement stirs behind the closed gate of a convenience store. My focus shifts to the reflection in the glass panel across from me. Shapes emerge. 2 more, maybe 3. Wandering the food court slowly, their pacing deliberate, heads jerking slightly like they're sniffing the air without knowing they are. I can't fight them all. That isn't an option. I angle myself toward the service corridor, leaning forward so my weight is already in motion when I start to move. It's maybe 20 feet away. Not far, but far enough for sound to carry if I misstep. I rise carefully, sliding my back along the wall of the sandwich shop until I reach the edge of the counter. My boots avoid loose debris by habit now. Broken glass and plastic shards can announce you faster than shouting. The nearest infected pauses mid-step, head lifting slightly, as if some signal just passed between us that I didn't hear. I freeze, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, knife pointed low but ready. It stares for a long moment without seeing, then drifts forward again, slower this time. I take the chance and slide into the shadow of the corridor's entryway, shoulders brushing the frame before I squeeze inside. The air in here is different, stale, dense, like an unventilated attic after a storm. The narrow hallway smells faintly of spoiled grease and old mop water, and the sound of my footsteps softens against the rubber tiles. I switch the knife to my left hand and press my right palm to the wall, guiding myself by touch in the dim light. The hum of broken refrigeration units echoes faintly somewhere deeper inside, though I know the power's been gone for weeks. I move maybe 15 steps before I stop again. A metallic clatter rings out from behind me, soft, sharp, but distinct. Something fell out there, the kind of sound that brings every dead thing within earshot into the same place. I risk leaning just far enough around the doorframe to see back into the food court. The infected closest to the kiosk turns sharply at the sound, shoulders locking, head jerking once before it moves toward where the noise came from. Another 2 follow, drawn by nothing more than instinct. Their pace is slow, but it's coordinated in a way I don't like watching. I retreat fully into the service corridor, sliding deeper into the dark, until the echo of the food court fades behind me. The hallway bends twice before opening into a small storage area, lined with stacks of cardboard boxes, most of them collapsed or gnawed open by rats. A metal shelving unit has fallen across the far wall, the mess of supplies scattered below it untouched. I kneel beside the debris, hoping for something usable, but most of it's ruined. Spilled flour hardened into dusty chunks, canned drinks rusted through, and a box of energy bars that's been shredded by teeth and claws. I managed to salvage a single sealed pouch of mixed nuts buried under loose packaging and shove it into my bag. It's not much, but every calorie counts now. My fingers brush something sharp under a folded tarp nearby, and when I pull it free, I find a small folding utility knife with dried adhesive on the blade. I keep it, not for fighting, the reach is useless, but for prying open locked cabinets without risking noise. I stay crouched, head low, letting the silence stretch long enough for the tension in my chest to level out. But it doesn't last. From somewhere deeper down the corridor, past the next set of doors, there's movement, soft at first, then steadier. I freeze again, hand tightening around the knife handle instinctively. It doesn't sound like the dragging shuffle of the infected this time. Too deliberate, too controlled. A rhythmic tap of something solid brushing against metal as it moves. I back against the wall, lowering myself until my knees nearly touch the floor, straining to make out anything beyond the faint patches of reflected light. The sound stops. The air feels weighted, as though the entire terminal's holding still with me. And then, quietly, from somewhere down the dark, there's a wet inhale. Short, sharp, like something's testing the air. I edge backward until my shoulder blades press against the frame of the nearest door. My mind runs through options. Stay put and hope it passes, or slip back into the food court where the infected are scattered but distracted. Neither option feels good. I glance at the ceiling, tracing the ventilation shaft overhead, and consider it briefly, but I'd need tools to pull the grate without noise. That leaves waiting. I crouch lower, knees locked, trying to blend into the shadow behind a fallen mop bucket. 10 seconds pass, 20. I count breaths in sets of 4 just to keep from moving. Then something breaks the silence again. A faint rattle of chain links ahead, the metallic hum vibrating through the air duct. I picture a maintenance gate swinging against its hinges, but this sound carries weight behind it, like something's brushing past intentionally. I force myself to peek around the edge of a stacked box. There's no light, just a faint outline near the hallway's next bend, but the sound shifts again, scraping rubber soles, steady now, slower than Walking Dead but too precise to be wind or settling debris. I realize it's closer than I thought. My grip on the knife tightens enough to make my fingers ache. I don't want to fight, but if something comes around that bend at arm's reach, there won't be time for thought. Then, without warning, the noise stops completely. I wait longer this time, muscles screaming, until my legs burn from crouching, but nothing moves. No scraping, no breathing, no chain rattle. It's worse than hearing it, because now I don't know where it went. I force myself to control the panic trying to claw its way up, shifting my weight carefully onto the balls of my feet so I can bolt if I have to. I count 30 more seconds. Still nothing. Finally, I decide to move. 1 step. 2. Quiet. Every muscle locked tight, guiding my boots through open spaces in the debris field on instinct. I make it past the storage room, deeper into the maintenance corridor, keeping one hand braced along the wall in case I need to find a blind corner without light. I reach the end of the hallway and stop again, pressing my ear to the heavy steel door that separates this section from the lower retail passageways. Nothing but silence bleeds through, but that doesn't mean it's clear. If anything's out there, it'll hear the latch before I even finish pulling it. I risk it anyway, easing the door open millimeter by millimeter until the hinges stop complaining. A narrow stairwell winds downward, concrete steps slick with condensation from busted pipes overhead. The air here is different, cooler, heavier, as though it's sat unmoving since the outbreak. I make my way down slowly, one hand trailing the wall for balance, straining to listen past the distant thrum of dripping water. Halfway down, I pause again when faint light blooms below, soft and erratic, like a candle caught in a draft. Shadows move across it, quick flashes I can't pin down, but there's no sound accompanying them. My first thought is scavengers. I take the last few steps and crouch low at the corner, letting just one eye peek past the concrete barrier into the hallway below. The light comes from a broken lantern left upright on the tile, its battery dying fast. Beyond it, the passage widens into what used to be a retail corridor, the doors to multiple storefronts hanging crooked in broken frames. There are drag marks across the floor, thin, uneven trails through dust that hasn't been disturbed in months. One of the marks disappears beneath a half-closed security gate, where something forced its way under, pulling weight behind it. I retreat silently back against the wall, close my eyes, and slow my breathing, counting the sounds around me again. Nothing now except dripping water and the distant groan of shifting metal somewhere above. Whatever moved through here isn't here anymore. That should make me feel safer. It doesn't. I slip the knife back into its sheath, flex my hand, and glance at the corridor leading deeper into the terminal. I came down here for food and water, not answers. But this is the kind of thing that gnaws at the back of your thoughts until you know more. Something was dragging bodies. Living or dead, I don't know yet. I decide to circle around the lantern and continue toward the end of the retail wing. If I'm careful, I can make it back to the food court without doubling over into the infected I spotted earlier. I step around the light, keeping my boots to the edges where dust is thickest so prints don't show, and edge toward the broken storefronts. One of the signs overhead flickers faintly in the dark, as if catching a dying charge from somewhere buried deep in the walls. I don't like that. It means power's trying to bleed from somewhere else in the terminal, and that attracts attention, not just mine. By the time I reach the far end, the corridor opens into a maintenance junction with a wide glass wall overlooking the lower gates. Through the smudged glass, I can see the main concourse stretching out beyond, and it's worse than I thought. Dozens of infected are clustered around a collapsed baggage carousel, their limbs jerking in slow, disjointed spasms. Others drift along the upper mezzanine, aimless but circling constantly, their patterns overlapping like restless ants. The only way back to the tower now runs directly through there. I drop into a crouch, pressing my back against the concrete as I scan for any alternate path I missed. But the layout here hasn't changed since the day I started this job. No maintenance shafts that loop back safely. No ventilation ducts big enough to squeeze through without making a racket. The route's unavoidable. I rest my forehead lightly against the glass, eyes tracing the motion of the infected below, calculating how long I'd have before a sound draws them in. The math isn't good. The longer I wait, the closer night pulls in, and the terminal is a different beast entirely in darkness. When power died, the emergency lights burned through their batteries in days. Now, when the sun dips, this place turns black in a way the human eye never adjusts to. Every scrap of movement becomes guesswork, and sound feels amplified 100-fold. The infection slowed most of them, made them clumsy, stripped away the coordination they once had. But when you can't see them coming, speed hardly matters. One mistake in the dark, and you don't even get to know which way they came from. I've spent 4 months learning when to move and when to wait, but here, in this stretch of glass and steel with open sightlines in every direction, there's no safe choice left. I force myself back from the window and drop into a low crouch beside a row of dented lockers. The edge of the mezzanine gives me a partial view of the concourse below, letting me track patterns as best I can. The cluster near the baggage carousel is the worst, a dense knot of bodies swaying slightly, jerking against each other like a tide. Most of them aren't aware of each other anymore, just drawn into the same points by lingering smells and old sounds. But 2 others pace the perimeter deliberately, looping around the collapsed carousels, pausing occasionally as if listening for something I can't hear from here. That's the danger in this place, the quiet ones. You expect chaos, screaming, snarls. The stories made it sound that way before the lines went dead. But up close, it's mostly silence. Just slow shifts, scraping shoes, small changes in breathing if you get near enough. The silence tricks you into thinking they're mindless, but I've seen them coordinate without meaning to. One notices, the others follow. That chain reaction is what kills most scavengers who try to move through terminals like this. I scan left and right, tracing possible routes in my head. There are 3 options, and none of them are good. The maintenance corridor I came through leads back into the food court, but I'd be boxed in quickly if even 2 wander through at the wrong moment. The upper concourse balcony loops around and connects to the main security checkpoint, but that path's open, too exposed, and every footstep would echo. The third is straight down through the escalator bank ahead, which drops me behind a row of service counters and into a low corridor leading toward the tower stairwell. It's the fastest route, but it passes directly under the baggage carousel swarm. The faster I move, the better my odds. But speed means sound, and sound means death down there. I stay in place another 5 minutes, memorizing the shifting rhythm of the infected. There's a moment, a gap that forms every few minutes when 3 of them drift toward the far windows and the patrolling pair circle away from the escalators. If I time it right, I can slip down without drawing their eyes. I wait for that opening, breathing through my nose, counting slow. measuring each shuffle below like a chess game where one wrong move ends everything. Then it comes. I rise into a crouch, knife clipped back to my belt, so both hands stay free, and move low toward the escalators. The glass beneath me creaks faintly under shifting air currents, and for a second I feel exposed, outlined against the mezzanine railing like a signal flare. But none of them react. Their aimless pacing continues, heads bent, attention pulled somewhere else. At the top of the escalator, I pause and grip the rail lightly. Dust coats the black rubber like frost, and the faint track of smeared fingerprints winds down the polished chrome. Someone came through here after the outbreak, but not recently. The steps below are cluttered with loose papers, pieces of broken signage, and a single collapsed duffel bag split open from the side. A faded boarding pass clings to the lip of a stair, edges curling from moisture long evaporated. I start my descent one slow step at a time, boots angling toward the inner track where the steel panels dampen most of the sound. The air grows heavier here, stale and still, the tang of mildew mixing with something older, sourer. Halfway down, I glance to my right where the glass wall overlooks the main floor. One of the patrolling infected has stopped completely, head tilted sharply toward the ceiling, as if scent or vibration drew its attention. Its hands twitch loosely at its sides, and though its body doesn't turn, I can see its dead focus shift toward the escalator. I freeze mid-step, spine locked, holding still until the slow tilt of its head relaxes again. A groan stirs low in its throat, almost questioning, before it drifts back into its endless loop around the carousel. At the bottom, I drop into a crouch behind the service counters. From here, the swarm is barely 40 feet away, their movements separated by nothing but fractured walls of glass and thin beams of steel support. One of them brushes against the carousel frame, sending an empty suitcase tumbling to the floor, and the hollow thud echoes louder than it should. A ripple runs through the group instantly. Heads lift in small unison, jaws slack, but there's no rush, no immediate frenzy, just orientation. They're listening, waiting for confirmation before acting. I use the distraction to slip between two counters and into the shadow of the low corridor leading toward the tower stairwell. The ceiling drops here, making me hunch instinctively, and the walls on both sides close in, with plaster panels stripped by time and water damage. Pieces of ceiling tile crunch faintly under my boots, no matter how I angle my steps, and each sound sets my teeth on edge. I pause twice to let the silence reset before moving forward again. The air down here is worse, thick with something metallic beneath the staleness. I keep one hand braced along the wall as I edge deeper, knife back in my grip now, thumb resting lightly against the flat of the blade for control. The sound of shuffling above grows fainter the further I move until it disappears entirely under the weight of my own breathing. It should feel safer here, but it doesn't. Somewhere up ahead, a faint scrape answers me. Metal against stone, irregular but deliberate. I freeze, holding low against the wall, waiting for it to repeat. Seconds pass. Then it comes again. Softer this time, then silence. The sound isn't wandering. It's pausing, listening. Whatever's ahead knows it isn't alone. I edge forward slowly, eyes adjusting to the dim light leaking faintly from the corridor's far end. My shoulders brush flaking drywall, fragments of plaster catching on my jacket, the grit rolling down to the tile underfoot. I stop short when a thin line of dusty footprints appears at the bend, smaller than mine, newer. They lead out of sight, following the curve into the terminal's underbelly. That tight coil of instinct pulls hard, telling me to turn back now, climb, and risk the swarm above. But my water's low, my food nearly gone, and the supplies I came for are somewhere on this floor. Retreat means nothing waiting for me tomorrow but slower death upstairs. I step around the corner. The corridor opens slightly here, stretching into a broader maintenance wing lined with abandoned cleaning carts, tipped storage bins, and collapsed signage. An overturned luggage trolley blocks part of the path ahead, its wheels still locked in place. A stale smell leaking from within the bag pinned beneath it. Beyond the cart, the faint light comes from a cracked emergency lamp hanging at an angle against the wall, battery nearly burned out. I stay low, letting my shadow fold into the shelving stacked along the right side. The scrape comes again, closer this time, directly ahead beyond the lamp's reach. My body tenses, knife firm, but I keep still, listening. It's softer now, but steady, like something dragging cloth across tile at the edge of my vision. And then, slowly, something emerges from the far shadows. A figure crouched low, back turned, hands buried deep inside an open supply bag. Its shoulders rise and fall with measured breaths. I stay perfectly motionless, tracking the small, precise shifts in its body. Human, not infected. Its jacket's torn down one sleeve, hair matted, but the way it freezes mid-movement tells me it heard me before I saw it. For a long moment, neither of us moves. Just the sound of strained air between us, waiting for someone to make the first mistake. The figure turns its head slightly, just enough to catch me in peripheral vision. No words, no sudden movements. It lifts one hand slowly, palm open, as though signaling neutrality without risking sound. The knife in my grip stays steady, but my stance eases just enough to show I'm not rushing forward either. Then something upstairs changes everything. The sharp crack of glass breaking echoes from the mezzanine above, followed by a rising chorus of groans rolling through the terminal. The swarm found something, or something found them, and that sound will spread like fire. The figure ahead of me stiffens, glances toward the ceiling, then looks back once at me. Without warning, it bolts, vanishing deeper into the maintenance wing without a sound. I stay frozen in place, gripping the counter beside me, listening to the growing chaos above. It spreads fast. First one echo, then several, then the rising roar of bodies converging. Heavy steps hammer glass floors somewhere above the baggage carousel, but down here, the silence returns almost as quickly as it broke. The infected haven't found this corridor yet. That's my only advantage now, and it won't last long. I press forward cautiously, scanning the dark ahead where the stranger disappeared. Supplies or not, my priorities shifting. If the swarm blocks the tower stairwell, I need another exit, and the maintenance wing might be the only shot left. I move slower this time, hugging walls and cutting wide around overturned bins and luggage carts to keep my boots off loose debris. The faint smell of burned insulation filters from somewhere ahead, sharp enough to sting. When I finally reach the spot where the figure had been crouched, the open supply bag remains abandoned on the floor. Inside, I find 2 sealed water bottles, an unopened pack of energy bars, and a faded airport security ID clipped to the strap. I crouch over the bag, scanning the hallway in both directions. The silence down here feels deeper now, heavier somehow, as though the swarm above has drawn every sound out of this level. I hesitate for a long moment, considering whether to take everything, but instinct says, leave something behind. If that person is alive and moving, I'd rather avoid forcing them into a corner later. I slide 1 water bottle and an energy bar into my pack and set the bag back exactly how I found it, angling the strap the same way, making it look untouched. The ID tag catches my attention before I step away. Its corners frayed, the name almost smudged clean, but I make out P. Lasker and a faded terminal security logo. Whoever they were, they had access to restricted areas. Maybe still do. I stand carefully, letting my eyes adjust to the uneven shadows stretching deeper into the wing. There's faint airflow coming from somewhere ahead, pulling cooler currents along the corridor. That shouldn't be possible, not this far below the main ventilation grid, which means there's another opening. Maybe an emergency exit, maybe something else entirely. I adjust the strap of my pack and continue forward, shoulders brushing against cracked drywall panels, boots soft against the tile as I follow the cold draft. I pass another cleaning cart tipped sideways into a corner, its contents scattered across the floor. Rusted spray bottles, collapsed mop handles, an overturned bucket. The dust is thicker here, settled undisturbed except for the drag marks I noticed earlier. Long grooves carved through the grime leading away from the service hall and deeper into the shadows ahead. Each mark looks deliberate, spaced evenly, like someone pulled weight behind them. The quiet doesn't help. It presses at my ears until every subtle sound feels sharpened. I pause and listen, holding my breath to sift the faintest threads of noise apart. The distant groan of the structure settling, the muffled chaos upstairs as the swarm shifts across glass floors, and somewhere far below, the low, drawn-out hum of machinery. That makes me stop entirely. Power's been dead across most of the airport for months, yet here, deep under Terminal B, something is still alive enough to make noise. I move on carefully, tracking the drag marks until they angle into a wider opening ahead. My boots brush against loose insulation spilling from the ceiling, and small clouds of fibers float in the thin beam of light leaking from my dying lantern. The room opens suddenly into a large storage bay. Shelving units stretch across the walls, most of them emptied out long ago. Cardboard boxes gutted and collapsed. A stack of maintenance crates sits untouched near the far wall, the locks on them intact, surface coated in dust untouched for weeks, maybe longer. I cross the room cautiously, knife drawn again, scanning each corner for movement. The air's heavier here, the metallic tang stronger now, mixed with a faint earthy rot. I crouch beside the crates and brush away a layer of dust to find embossed lettering. TSA secured equipment. That means specialized gear, radios maybe, or emergency masks. But the locks are heavy steel, impossible to break open quietly without tools. I make a mental note of the location, knowing it might be worth returning later if I survive tonight. A faint sound shifts the air behind me, soft but deliberate, like rubber soles brushing faintly over tile. My muscles lock. I don't turn right away. Instead, I angle my knife slightly and tilt my head, just enough to catch the movement in peripheral vision. A shadow slides against the far wall, human height, slow, measured. No groaning, no dragging feet, just quiet intent. My pulse climbs, but I stay perfectly still, lowering my stance gradually until I can melt closer to the nearest shelf, the knife held low and tight to my chest. The sound stops completely, but the quiet feels charged now, full of something waiting for me to react. I watch the reflection in a cracked piece of metal shelving nearby, focusing on shapes instead of direct sight. There's nothing for several long seconds, and then, from the opposite side of the room, a faint metallic creak as another door pushes slightly inward, and then closes again without sound. Whoever's down here knows how to move. I hold my position another minute, forcing slow breaths until the tension eases enough to shift again. With the stranger gone or hiding, I decide not to follow. Not yet. Whoever it was, they left their bag back there on purpose. Maybe bait, maybe an accident. But I'm not walking into someone else's trap tonight. I slip deeper into the storage bay, edging toward the far side where the airflow sharpens into a narrow vent between two walls. The gap leads to another corridor, smaller than the last, the ceiling lower, the walls unfinished. Exposed pipes run overhead, damp with condensation that drips steadily onto cracked concrete. The air from here carries a sharper bite, cooler and cleaner than the rest of this floor, which tells me there's an exit or ventilation shaft somewhere ahead. My steps stay slow, deliberate, letting each drip of water mask the faint scuff of my boots. Halfway down, I pass an old generator room, wedged behind a steel mesh door. Inside, the outlines of equipment sit coated in dust and oil, cables trailing across the floor like dead vines. One of the units carries a military stencil marking, not standard airport issue, and a faint green LED still blinks irregularly on its side. My throat tightens when I see it. That means something here is powered, if barely. Maybe backup batteries, maybe old security locks running on isolated reserves. Either way, it means this wing hasn't been abandoned as long as it looks. I lean closer, trying to listen past the dripping pipes and settling groans of the structure. Somewhere deeper, beyond the locked mesh, a faint rhythmic pulse hums steadily. 4 beats, pause, 4 beats, pause. At first, I think backup pumps. Then I realize pumps don't stop between cycles like that. It's deliberate. A noise breaks the pattern, the sharp ring of glass shattering faintly from above, muffled but distant. It takes me a moment to place it, then another heartbeat to understand what it means. The swarm upstairs is moving again. Either something else entered the concourse, or the figure I saw earlier has crossed their path. Both scenarios are bad for me. The groans roll faintly through the structure, layered and uncoordinated, reverberating through steel frames until it feels like the walls themselves vibrate. I force myself forward, deeper into the lower level, putting as much space as possible between me and the shifting chaos above. The corridor bends sharply before opening into a freight loading bay sealed behind a half-open rolling gate. Thin beams of night bleed through the slats, faint and silver, revealing rows of grounded shipping crates stacked like barricades. Outside, the low groans are louder, scattered now but numerous, carried on wind pushing against the side doors. I duck behind a crate and take inventory quickly. 2 water bottles now, a packet of mixed nuts, a single energy bar. Not enough to last another week if I stay confined to the tower. I'd come down here for better supplies, maybe batteries, but the situation's shifting too fast now to focus on scavenging alone. The exit gate's tempting, but the infected outside make it suicide without knowing where they're clustered. Instead, I stay tucked in shadow, tracing the floor with my eyes until I catch faint streaks where something heavy has been dragged across the concrete and out through the gate. It's the same pattern as the marks in the hallway, evenly spaced grooves, like crates or bodies moved regularly. Someone's using this route for something, and recently. I crouch lower and study the tracks carefully, following them backward deeper into the loading bay until they vanish behind a stack of old supply pallets. I edge around slowly, keeping my weight balanced and my movements controlled, when I catch a faint flicker of light bleeding faintly from beneath the pallets. A narrow passage, concealed, leading further underground. For a moment, I consider turning back, climbing to the tower while I still can, even if it means threading through the swarm upstairs. But the cold air spilling from the gap and the subtle vibration beneath my boots from machinery below tells me something else. Someone's still down here. Someone's been operating under this airport long after the outbreak broke the surface. I pull my knife into my grip again, lean against the nearest crate for balance, and stare at the dark slit beneath the pallets. Beyond it lies more than scavenged food or supplies. Answers, maybe. But it's deep, uncharted, and if someone's down there running power, it means the dead aren't my only problem anymore. The temptation to investigate pulls at me, but survival isn't about curiosity anymore. It's about odds, and right now, mine are already bad. I step back from the gap and press against the crate's rough surface, letting myself breathe long enough to steady my head. My options keep circling the same closed loop, and each one looks worse than the last. The tower isn't safe long term. I've stretched my supplies for months, but 2 water bottles and a handful of food won't get me through another week, maybe less. The terminals are stripped bare, and the scavenging routes I used to rely on are crawling now. Every path I once trusted has shifted under me. Outside the airport, that's another gamble. The perimeter fence stretches for miles, topped with barbed wire, and the roads beyond were jammed solid when the collapse began. Somewhere out there is the city, but the plumes of smoke I used to see from the tower stopped weeks ago. Whatever fires burned through downtown probably burned through the survivors too. Even if I make it past the fence, there's no guarantee I find anything but emptiness and more dead ground. I crouch near the stack of pallets and close my eyes for a moment, replaying the first weeks after everything fell apart. Helicopters thundered over this place once. Military trucks rolled the perimeter roads, and we thought this airport mattered. We thought control towers would mean something. But the calls stopped. The frequencies went quiet. One night, the last of the lights in the terminal blinked off, and from that moment forward, this place became a glass tomb with 1,000 wandering bodies inside. I open my eyes and force myself back into the present. Survival doesn't care about memory. It doesn't care what the tower used to be. It only cares about action. If I stay, I starve. If I leave, I risk walking into something worse. That's the calculation now. No rescue, no salvation, just the least bad choice left. I sling the pack over my shoulder and move toward the far end of the loading bay, where the lower tunnels connect to emergency access points. If there's any chance of leaving this airport alive, it's through equipment I've only ever seen listed in floor plans. Ground vehicles stored in maintenance hangars below Concourse E. They were supposed to be used for airfield security patrols, fuel runs, and baggage transfers. If one of them's still functional, even partially, it could get me past the perimeter fence faster than running blind into open ground. But getting there isn't simple. Those tunnels cut under two other concourses and open directly into access points often swarmed by infected. My knife's good at close range, but if I run into anything larger than a handful, I'm done. I'll need to move fast and stay silent, timing every shift around the chaos upstairs. The tunnel drops lower into unfinished concrete, walls narrowing as pipes overhead drip condensation onto cracked tile. My boots sink slightly into dust caked along the edges, where few people have walked since the outbreak. I pause occasionally, pressing my palm against the wall to gauge vibration. The muffled weight of groans above filters through steel beams, but nothing yet from this level. Then I hear it, a distant rumble behind me, faint but layered, like something spilling down the freight corridor I just left. I kill my lantern instinctively and press into the shadows beside a stack of maintenance crates, breathing shallow as the sound grows clearer, shuffling, uneven, multiplied by echoes in the concrete. Not dozens, but enough to ruin me if they reach this tunnel. Each step is careful but urgent, knife low in my hand as I angle toward the tunnel bend ahead. The airflow here sharpens, cooler, pulling faint drafts through a break somewhere further down. That tells me I'm close to an access hatch, the first possible escape point, but also means I'm headed straight into open ground where sound carries farther. Behind me, the noise hasn't faded. The infected are following. Whether they scented me or were drawn by something else, it doesn't matter. When I reach the hatch, I ease one eye level with the thin glass panel set into the steel frame. Outside, the night spreads wide across the airfield, faintly lit by a bruised sky. Dozens of infected stagger between grounded aircraft, their movement irregular but constant, some looping aimlessly while others drift toward a single focus somewhere beyond my sightline. The hatch is useless. Too much exposed ground, no cover, nowhere to move without drawing every set of dead eyes to me. I drop back into the tunnel and press forward fast, angling toward the access corridor that curves deeper beneath Concourse E. The walls sweat moisture here, faint rivulets slipping down chipped paint, and the air grows heavier with each step. My boots brush loose fragments of metal as I pass, their sound swallowed instantly by the rising echoes behind me. Whatever's moving back there isn't stopping. I push faster, past a row of old storage rooms stripped bare years before I started working here. Rusted fire extinguishers lean crooked against collapsed shelving, and tangled wiring spills from broken ceiling panels like skeletal vines. My legs burn, lungs tight, but I keep moving, using the draft ahead as my marker until I finally reach the junction where two tunnels meet. That's when I hear the sound I didn't expect. Wet tearing, muffled chewing, breath low and ragged. I slow instantly, knife firm in my grip, letting my body angle low against the wall before I edge forward carefully enough to avoid dragging sound along the concrete. The faint light spilling from a busted maintenance bulb ahead paints irregular shadows across the corridor. 4 shapes crouch around a single form sprawled on the floor, shoulders jerking with each motion. I stay frozen, letting my eyes adjust to the scene fully. The body on the ground wears a riot vest, the helmet cracked open on one side, dried blood mixing with something fresh. A sidearm still rests holstered on the officer's hip, untouched, while one of the infected pulls hard at what's left of his chest plate, tearing away damp fabric with jerking, mindless strength. These tunnels were supposed to be empty. The group stays low, fixated, the wet sounds muffled under their breathless rhythm. I check behind me. Still no sight of the ones from the freight corridor, but their groans are rising faintly now, drifting closer. Waiting isn't an option. If I hesitate, this will turn into a cornered choke point, and I'll be boxed in by both sides. I shift my grip higher on the knife, forcing my steps silent until I close the gap to 10 feet. I need to make it quick, clean, and quiet. The first one drops before the others even react, steel driving up under the base of its jaw, weight angled forward so I can guide it down without a sound. My free hand catches its shoulder and eases it to the ground, as I pivot sharply into the second, slicing low across its throat and dragging it back before it has a chance to release anything louder than a gurgle. The third turns faster than I expect, teeth snapping wildly, clawing against my jacket, but I drive the blade upward hard, wrenching it free only when it collapses under me. The last one doesn't turn at all. It's too far gone, locked into feeding, and a single quick thrust between vertebrae ends it before it can rise. I crouch low over them, chest heaving, wiping the knife clean against what's left of the officer's vest. The wet sounds are gone now, replaced by silence so fragile it feels unnatural down here. I check the corridor behind me again. Still no movement yet, but the echoes from the freight wing are louder, the group's growing, spilling into spaces they shouldn't. I drag the officer's sidearm from his holster and check the magazine, half-loaded, slide-worn but functional. I take it without hesitation, sliding it into my belt, then strip the spare mag from his vest before moving toward the far end of the corridor, where the draft sharpens into a colder pull. The tunnels open slightly ahead, branching into a larger hub where old directional signs still hang cracked and half-faded above sealed doors. One points toward a ground service garage. If there's any chance of finding a vehicle capable of pushing past the perimeter fence, it's there. But the growing roar behind me tells me I don't have much time to check it before I'm forced into the open, whether I want it or not. I take one last long look down the access route I came from, the low light fading into complete darkness, and grip the knife tighter in one hand while resting the other against the new pistol's grip at my hip. Choices are running thin, food's nearly gone, security's collapsing. Whatever's left down here, it's shifting fast, and nothing about it feels random anymore. It's like the infected are moving in waves I can't see, responding to something I can't hear, and the unknowns are starting to stack too high. The longer I stay in these tunnels, the more I feel the ground shifting beneath me. The sign above me points toward the ground service garage, its letters faded and cracked under a layer of grime. If there's any way out of this airport that isn't suicide, it's through there. I angle my lantern low, letting just enough light spill forward to see without throwing reflections down the walls, and move into the next corridor. The hum of machinery from somewhere deeper in the levels is faint but steady, a distant reminder that something here still draws power long after everything else went dark. It gnaws at me quietly. Whoever's been running power down here has left no trace of themselves, just signs and shadows. The walls narrow again, lined with exposed conduit and insulated pipes running along the ceiling like bundled veins. Rust flakes down in small spirals as I pass beneath, sticking to the damp fabric of my jacket. The faint draft pulling through the tunnels grows sharper now, cooler, like the air in this part of the airport connects somewhere closer to the surface. That means easier movement. It also means the infected could be using it as much as I am. I slow my pace when I reach the first split. One path bends sharply left toward what looks like another sealed security gate, while the right curves gradually into faint open space. The airflow comes from the right, and so does a faint metallic scent. Oil, rubber, the smell of machines untouched for months. The garage is close. I pause long enough to angle my ear back toward where I came from. Silence for now, but silence has been deceptive here before. I press forward, keeping low and steady. The tunnel opens into a wide access bay lined with old metal lockers and cracked benches where crews once prepped for shifts. I sweep my lantern slowly, finding an overturned orange safety vest, a dented thermos, and piles of dust undisturbed on the far edges of the room. No footprints here. That's good. A row of lockers on the left stands partially open, their doors bent inward from impact, but the smell coming off them stops me short. A faint rot laced with mildew. I grip the handle of the nearest door, hesitate, then tug it open anyway. Inside are scraps of old uniforms, faded security patches curling off sleeves, and a bundle of torn boots collapsed into themselves. Underneath, tucked into the corner, I find a single fire extinguisher with its gauge still showing pressure. I take it, testing the weight briefly before sliding it into my pack's side strap. If things go wrong in the garage, that canister's more useful than a knife in tight spaces. I press deeper into the room, following the scuffed linoleum path where crew traffic once carved faint streaks through the dust. At the far end, a reinforced steel door stands closed, its control panel cracked and lifeless, but the manual latch is still intact. I listen against the frame, holding my breath, and hear nothing but distant wind bleeding faintly through unseen vents beyond the walls. I wrap my fingers around the handle, give one slow pull, and slip inside. The smell hits first. The garage is massive, stretching out beneath Concourse E in rows of grounded vehicles. Baggage tractors, tow rigs, mobile stair units, and fuel carts all lined neatly in formation like ghosts of a vanished workforce. Dust covers everything, disturbed only by faint drag marks weaving between equipment, old footprints layered over each other until they vanish beneath the far shadows. But it's the smell of stale gasoline and oil that dominates the air, thick and metallic, coating the back of my throat. The ceiling's higher here, with exposed beams crossing overhead and skylight grates letting faint strips of grey bleed down into the cavernous space. I sweep the lantern in a slow arc, stopping on the closest patrol vehicle, a squat, armored buggy used for perimeter checks. Its windshield shattered inward, glass pooled on the driver's seat, and streaks of dark stains run down the hood. The ignition's busted, wires hanging in a loose tangle, but the tires are intact, still holding air. I check another, then a third, each one worse than the last. Stripped wiring, missing fuel lines, broken axles. Whatever hope I had for a quick escape dies a little here. I crouch behind one of the tow rigs and think through what this means. If none of these vehicles run, I have two options. First, strip the parts myself, rebuild one, and gamble on having enough fuel to make the perimeter road. That's weeks of work I don't have time for. Second, abandon the airport entirely and head out on foot. But the swarm outside makes that feel like walking straight into my grave with my eyes open. The third option is one I've been avoiding since the start. Find whoever's been keeping the power alive down here and take whatever transport they're using. That means crossing into whatever hidden levels are buried under these tunnels. The ones behind pallets, security doors, and marks left in dust I don't understand yet. A low vibration rises under the concrete, faint but steady, pulling me back from thought. Not noise exactly, more like motion transmitted through steel and stone. I press my palm against the floor. 4 pulses, pause. 4 pulses, pause. It's the same pattern I felt earlier in the generator room. Whoever, or whatever, is feeding power into these levels is still active, and this place might connect directly to them. Before I can think deeper, the sound of groans builds faintly behind me, muffled but growing, drifting down the same access tunnel I entered from. I kill the lantern instantly and crouch low between 2 vehicles, pressing into shadow. Within seconds, faint shapes slide against the dim light bleeding through the doorway. 3, then 5, then more. A trickle of infected moving in silence at first, their forms spilling into the garage with uncanny coordination. I hold as still as I can, watching the patterns. Most shuffle toward the far corners, noses low, following scent trails or vibrations. One of them drifts close enough that I can make out faint cracks spiderwebbing across its skull, its jaw hanging partially unhinged, lips pulled back over blackened gums. I keep my hand tight on the pistol's grip, but I don't fire. Not yet. Gunfire draws swarms, and once this place erupts, there's no stopping it. I wait until the closest infected turns and stumbles toward a row of fuel carts on the opposite side. That's my gap. I move fast but low, sliding between 2 patrol rigs toward a side door partially concealed behind stacked crates. The handle's stiff from disuse, but it gives under my weight, swinging inward with a faint groan of old hinges. The noise is enough to trigger the ones nearest me. The groans spike instantly, sharp and guttural. Shadows shift, bodies twisting unnaturally fast for something that slow seconds ago. I slam the door shut behind me and take off down the narrow passage beyond, boots hammering against damp tile, the echoes snapping back around me in uneven bursts. The corridor slopes sharply downward, angling deeper beneath the airport's sublevels. I sprint until the walls open into a wider tunnel lined with concrete ribs and faded directional arrows painted decades ago. My lantern bounces faint light along rusted pipes overhead, catching brief glimpses of rats scattering into drains as I pass. I glance back once and catch the ripple of movement spilling into the passage behind me. A dark wave advancing in jerks and stumbles, but gaining ground steadily. I round the next bend and stop dead. A maintenance tech lies half under an access panel. Orange vest darkened, hard hat split. 2 infected sway nearby, not feeding, stuck in a loop, fingers tapping at the vest's reflective strip, as if light still lived there. I slip behind them, one hand to jaw, one strike up under the ear, guide the weight down, then the second, steady, quick, controlled. They're just a dead man who tried to fix the building while it failed around him. This route was marked secure on the old terminal blueprints. It was supposed to be empty. The feeding slows as one of them lifts its head, strings of dark fluid sliding from its mouth, nostrils flaring faintly as it locks on me. The second follows almost immediately, twisting at the waist unnaturally fast, jaws slack and stained. There's no choice left but speed and force. I close the gap before they rise fully, knife flashing upward in a tight arc that buries into the base of the first one's skull. My free hand shoves its collapsing weight aside as the second lunges, teeth snapping inches from my forearm, before I slam the blade down hard at the collarbone and drive until it stops resisting. The third hesitates half a second too long, still bent over the officer's body, and a quick thrust under the jaw ends it clean. I drag them off silently, stacking them awkwardly against the wall while forcing myself to breathe through clenched teeth. There's no time to process the riot gear, the officer, or why these tunnels aren't empty. Behind me, the roar of the crowd pours louder into the space, carried on the stale wind funneled down from above. I grip the pistol in one hand, knife still slick in the other, and take a final look at the body on the floor. The officer's vest carries a faded airport insignia and a number stamped along the chest plate, but the badge is missing. Whoever they weren't alone when they came down here, and whoever followed them probably didn't make it any farther than this. The silence settles again for a moment, just heavy breathing and the faint drip of condensation somewhere deeper in the tunnels. But in the quiet, the thought finally hits me with weight I can't ignore anymore. I can't stay here, not another day. The tower used to feel like a sanctuary, but that illusion's dead now. The infected are moving differently, filling spaces they avoided before. Supplies are nearly gone, and every run into the terminals risks forcing me through tighter choke points where there's no room to retreat. Even tonight this trip was supposed to buy me time, but the swarm followed me farther than ever. It's like something shifted, some unseen line crossed without warning. If I climb back up there, I'll die waiting behind glass, starving while hundreds shuffle beneath me, circling, restless. I lean against the wall, wipe the knife clean again on my sleeve, and breathe shallow. My head's buzzing from lack of sleep, days bleeding together into this constant low hum of dread. I can't think straight anymore, not up there surrounded by silence and the weight of what's left of Erin's desk across from mine. Every hour, I feel myself unraveling a little more. This place is rotting me from the inside. That's when I remember the note. I found it 3 weeks ago, stuck to the inside of an observation window on the west mezzanine, written in shaky black marker and pressed against the glass for anyone passing underneath. Use their insides, they can't smell you. The message's edges were smeared where rain leaked through cracks in the skylight above, but the words were clear enough. I dismissed it back then, assuming whoever wrote it lost their mind long before leaving that warning. But now, standing here in the tunnels with the swarm moving above me like tides drawn by some invisible pull, it doesn't feel insane anymore. It feels like a gamble I can't ignore. If it works, I can walk through the crowd unnoticed, slipping past the terminal atriums and out onto the perimeter road before sunrise. Past the fence, past the airfield, maybe to something resembling open ground where I have a fighting chance. But if it doesn't, I'll be dragged down before I make it 10 steps. I can't test it in the middle of a swarm. That's suicide. I need to find 2 of them alone, somewhere isolated, somewhere I can control the ground if it goes wrong. There's an old baggage transfer hallway near the bottom of Concourse E where I've seen stragglers before, wandering separate from the packs. That'll be the place. I holster the pistol, sliding it snug into my belt, and move deeper into the tunnels until I find the faded arrows painted decades ago, following the path marked Transfer Lane, East Hold. The air gets thicker again, warm currents meeting the cooler drafts, mixing into something sour. I kill my lantern to keep shadows off the walls and move by touch along the pipes instead, letting memory guide me through these angles I've memorized over weeks of scavenging. By the time I reach the bend where the transfer hall opens, faint blue light leaks through a cracked glass door ahead, reflecting off the damp concrete beneath my boots. I ease forward and angle just enough to peer through the gap without exposing myself fully. 2 of them. Perfect. The first stands half slumped against a steel luggage rack, its head lowered, arms hanging loose and broken at odd angles, its shirts torn to ribbons, the fabric glued to dried streaks crusted along its ribs. The second is kneeling low near an overturned suitcase, pouring absent-mindedly at a pile of clothing, like it remembers the act, but not the purpose. Neither's close enough to the doors to notice me yet. This is the test. I step silently into the hall, knife firm in my grip, and close the distance slow and deliberate until I'm less than 10 feet away. The air down here stinks faintly already, stale blood mixed with rot, and I force myself to breathe shallow through my mouth. I pick the closer one first, crouching low and pressing my shoulder into the cold steel of a conveyor belt for balance. My boots glide softly, frictionless, each step angled to avoid loose trash scattered across the tiles. When I'm close enough to see its neck twitch slightly with each hollow breath, I push forward, quick and silent, clamping one hand over its jaw while the knife drives upward just beneath the skull. It goes limp instantly, weight sagging heavy against my chest as I guide it down slow, lowering the body without letting it hit hard. The second reacts too late. Startled by motion, it doesn't process fully until I'm already behind it. I grip its collar, yanking it backward as the blade slides across its throat in one clean pull, my weight braced to control the collapse as it folds sideways onto the tiles. Both are down before a sound escapes either one. I crouch between them, knife dripping faintly into the pooled grime, and let the moment stretch while I listen for echoes. The swarm above is distant enough, but my ears catch faint vibrations in the steel frames along the wall. Somewhere, deeper in the sublevels, something metallic shifts like weight pressed hard against ducts. I block the thought out, focusing on the task. This is the part I've been avoiding since I read that note. I pull the first body into the shadow of the conveyor frame, crouch low, and force my stomach into steel, while I open the shirt and work the mess across my sleeves and collar, grinding it into seams until the stench sits heavy enough to mask me. The smell hits instantly, sharp, acidic, foul enough to burn the back of my throat. But I keep working, dragging a handful of clotted fluid up and across my jacket's chest and sleeves, pressing it into the seams and collar. I smear the second one, covering my legs, boots and gloves, until the stench clings heavy enough to make each inhale shallow and sharp. By the time I'm done, my clothes are slick, my hands shaking faintly as the weight of what I'm doing finally settles. If the note's right, this will make me invisible to them. If it's wrong, I'll be walking straight into death dressed in its skin. I wipe the knife off on a shredded sleeve, holster it, and settle the pistol into my right hand instead. One deep breath to settle my chest, one more to focus, and I push back toward the cracked door where dim blue light spills faintly into the transfer lane. Past here lies the concourse atrium and the swarm I avoided earlier. The atrium connects directly to a secondary maintenance stairwell that leads up to the service road behind the southern fence. If I make it through that crowd, I'll finally have a way out. I press my forehead lightly to the doorframe, counting silently until my pulse matches the rhythm of my breathing, and ease it open just enough to let myself through. The cool draft of air hits me first, carrying the distant stench of hundreds gathered in one place. Beyond the narrow hallway, faint silhouettes move like slow tides beneath broken skylights, where shadows bleed into each other. The groans layered so deeply they merge into a single low hum. I pause just inside the threshold, adjusting to the dim light, forcing myself to watch their patterns before stepping forward. The concourse atrium stretches wide, broken glass glittering faintly under weak moonlight bleeding through the skylight fractures above. Food courts, gate seating, and luggage piles scatter across the open space like someone froze an evacuation halfway through and abandoned it mid-motion. Between the shadows, the infected drift slowly, unpredictable but constant, some hunched against walls, others weaving their aimless paths between the metal chairs and overturned kiosks. I count at least 60 directly in my line of sight, maybe more tucked behind structural columns where my angle can't catch them. The smell of rot here is oppressive. Even smeared in the gore of 2 dead ones, it cuts through my nostrils and burns behind my eyes, but I force myself to breathe shallow, each inhale measured and low. This has to work. If the note was right, their sense of smell dominates everything else. Sight means almost nothing to them. Sound just calls their attention. If I smell like them, if I smell like death itself, then I become background noise in a graveyard full of it. I take my first step off the tile, slow and deliberate, letting my boot settle without pressure so it barely kisses the surface. No reaction. The 2 closest stand less than 20 feet ahead, both half turned away, their slack necks swaying faintly in rhythm with distant drafts rolling through broken panes. I ease forward, weight distributed on both feet, knife tucked at my hip but free, just in case. My own breathing sounds loud to me now, louder than the scattered groans, louder than the soft hiss of wind. One of them turns slightly, its jaw slack, dark fluid dried along the front of its throat. My shoulders lock instinctively, freezing in place, but its gaze drifts past without focus. I wait a few seconds more before stepping again, closing the gap between me and a nearby cluster of toppled benches. Every sound matters now, the soft crunch of glass beneath my boot, the faint scrape of a chair leg shifting under disturbed weight. I pick a path through the atrium where the density of bodies is lowest, weaving between patches of shadow and using obstacles to break line of sight where possible. The disguise buys me time, but I'm not testing miracles here. I pass within 6 feet of one leaning against a kiosk counter, its face pale and cracked, where sun once hit it through broken skylights weeks ago. Flies gather along its lips, legs twitching faintly as it sways. My ribs ache from holding still until it shifts its stance away from me, returning to some idle, random point across the atrium. Halfway through the space now, I can see the southern maintenance stairwell on the far wall, partially open, emergency lights above it long dead. Beyond those stairs lies the access corridor that runs parallel to the outer service road, which leads directly to the perimeter fence. That's my shot, the only exit with any cover, the only route that doesn't dump me straight onto open airfields crawling with hundreds more. I move carefully toward it, the stench clinging to my clothes thick enough now that my skin feels coated. My gloves are tacky, sleeves stiff with drying matter, and the sensation crawls along my neck like fire ants. But each infected I pass ignores me, drifting close enough that the hairs on my arms bristle when they brush air I displace. I want to believe this will hold. I want to. That's when the first mistake happens. Somewhere to my left, across the concourse near the gutted Starbucks kiosk, something crashes. Metal against tile, loud and sharp, ricocheting across the glass walls. Every infected in a 50-foot radius jolts upright in eerie, unnatural synchrony, heads snapping toward the sound at once. My instinct screams to run, but I force myself to stay frozen against the base of a fallen advertisement frame, chest low, eyes locked forward. They move together, dozens shifting like a tide flowing toward the noise, converging in loose, chaotic steps. The hum of low groans swells into a murmur, then into the fractured rhythm of hundreds rearranging in slow, jerking unison. I risk a glance over my shoulder but see nothing obvious in the shadows. Either someone else is down here making noise, or something heavy finally collapsed from the skylight supports above. I wait until their flow steadies, until the gaps between them widen enough for me to move without brushing shoulders. I slip from my cover and press forward, timing each step between their uneven pacing, my chest tight under the weight of this endless slow-motion gamble. 2 figures break from the main group, staggering just ahead near a row of security scanners left half toppled. One drags a broken wrist against the tile, each motion producing a faint scrape that drowns beneath the collective murmur. This is where the test becomes real. I walk straight past them, within arm's reach. My hand grips the knife hilt tight enough my knuckles ache, ready to drive steel into bone the second their posture shifts toward me. Neither turns. By the time I'm 30 feet from the maintenance stairwell, sweat has soaked through my collar, mixing with the layers of rot clinging to my jacket until the texture turns rough against my skin. The static buzz of groans and shifting footsteps behind me doesn't fade. It's constant, growing, spilling from atrium corners where new stragglers enter through glass doors broken long ago. It feels like the space is closing around me. Thousands of small movements pulling toward the center from every distant corridor feeding into this open grave. I step over a fallen body sprawled across the tiles, half decomposed, its torso collapsed inward. My boot grazes a piece of loose plastic as I pass, the faintest edge dragging across tile, and one of the infected just ahead snaps its head halfway toward me. My muscles lock, lungs stilled. It studies nothing, its empty gaze sliding past as though I never existed, before resuming its broken drift. I exhale slowly and keep moving. Finally, the stairwell entrance looms close enough that I can make out cracked lettering above the door. Maintenance access, authorized only. Its steel frame is bent slightly inward, likely forced open by earlier evacuations, and the landing beyond disappears into darkness. I grip the edge of the doorway, easing around a column where 3 more infected linger pressed against the far wall. The angle keeps me hidden from their periphery, their idle posture unbroken. But just as I reach the threshold, the sound I dreaded finally erupts, the roar of mass panic behind me. Something's wrong. I twist halfway, scanning the atrium through fractured beams of light, where reflections shiver across glass shards scattered on tile. Near the Starbucks kiosk, the swarm explodes outward in chaotic motion, no longer drifting, no longer aimless. They converge violently, fast, drawn to something unseen in the corner shadows. The noise rises like a storm, dozens groaning, some screaming sharp and high, colliding into walls, toppling benches in the frenzy. Then I see it. On the mezzanine above, a shape flashes briefly across broken glass railings. A person. Someone's up there, moving fast, scattering debris down into the atrium below, driving the infected wild with sound and motion. My gut twists. Whoever they are, they're not going to make it out alive. And if they keep this up, neither will I. I duck into the stairwell, pulling the steel door halfway shut behind me without letting it slam. The enclosed space is narrower, claustrophobic, the walls slick with condensation dripping from ruptured pipes overhead. Every creak of the infected beyond bleeds faintly through thin air vents near the ceiling, their collective moans warping into ghostly echoes. I descend 3 steps at a time until I reach the first landing, where a sliver of moonlight cuts through a cracked utility window, scattering pale shapes across damp concrete. My boots leave faint tracks smeared in residue from the disguise clinging to me, streaking faintly with each shift in my balance. The thought creeps in uninvited. If this doesn't work, if one wrong breath gives me away, I'll die cornered on these stairs with nowhere to run but into a wall of bodies. Below, the stairwell feeds into the south service corridor, where a locked gate separates the airport's sublevels from the maintenance road beyond the fence. I need to make it there before the chaos upstairs drives the swarm fully into this wing. Once they spill through these lower hallways, escape stops being theoretical. It becomes impossible. The stairwell walls groan faintly as I descend, the sound of concrete settling against steel ribs, but every creak feels like a signal carrying into the dark. My boots slide along wet steps, leaving streaks of the disguise smeared from earlier kills, the stench clinging so hard that even I've stopped noticing it. The last landing opens into a narrow corridor running straight ahead, the gate visible at the far end beneath a flickering fluorescent tube struggling against death. The light buzzes faintly, each pulse stretching thin shadows across the concrete walls, like skeletal hands reaching toward me. Beyond the gate, the faint outline of the service road is visible under moonlight. The perimeter fence looms faintly in the distance, barbed wire glinting under a pale slice of sky. My chest tightens, not from fear, but from the fact that freedom is actually visible now. I've lived months buried in glass and steel, never once seeing a path so close. I start forward, each step controlled, pistol steady in one hand, knife tucked where I can reach it fast. The corridor stinks of rust and mildew, every drip from ruptured pipes echoing down the length like ticking clocks. Halfway through, I pause when a low groan carries faintly from behind me, seeping through the stairwell door I left cracked. The swarm upstairs has shifted again. The chaos of that unknown survivor has stirred them badly, and now their restless flow bleeds into new wings of the terminal. They're moving like tides, crashing into spaces long untouched, and soon this corridor will be one of them. I press forward, urgency twisting at the back of my throat. At the gate, I crouch low, examining the rusted padlock clamped through the steel hasp. My fingers brush its edges, pitted metal, corroded by months of condensation. But it's still solid, not brittle enough to break by hand. I dig through my pack, pulling free the utility knife I picked earlier, prying at the latch with careful pressure. The metal groans softly under strain, bending slightly but refusing to snap. I grit my teeth and force more weight into the blade, angling leverage until the lock twists and cracks with a muffled ping that echoes farther than I'd like. I freeze instantly, pistol raised, waiting for the sound to draw movement. Seconds stretch thin. Nothing. Just dripping water and the faint buzz of the dying light above. I exhale slow, pocket the broken lock, and shove the gate open enough to slip through. The service corridor beyond is wide, meant for maintenance carts, its concrete surface cracked and uneven from weather seepage. To the right, the path angles directly toward the perimeter fence, its razor wire strands shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Beyond it lies the empty stretch of service road and the dark horizon of a city I no longer recognize. To the left, the corridor bends out of sight toward fuel depots long abandoned. I stop just inside the threshold, scanning both directions. The road looks empty, but emptiness here rarely means safety. Then the first sound reaches me. A low, collective murmur, carried by wind, rising from the direction of the fence. My eyes adjust, tracing faint shapes spilling along the outside perimeter. A crowd, dozens at least, pressing close to the wire, their outlines shifting and jerking in uneven waves. They're gathered tight against the barrier, arms snagged in coils, jaws working silently as they strain forward. The fence holds them back, but their numbers stretch far along the line, like a tide waiting for the right crack. So much for open ground. I retreat back into shadow, crouching low behind a collapsed cart. My head runs through the options again, burning each one down to its bare roots. Stay here, and I'll be trapped between the fence swarm and the chaos spilling from upstairs. Head left, toward the fuel depots, and I risk running into more concentrated groups. Push forward anyway, and I'll need to move inches from hundreds pressed against wire. One mistake away from collapse. The note's words echo again. It's worked so far, carried me this close, but I've never tested it against a mass this dense. My pulse kicks hard in my throat as I force the thought aside. Test or not, it's the only chance left. I smear more residue from my sleeve across my collar and gloves, grinding it in until the smell burns sharper. Then I rise, staying hunched, and begin moving toward the fence. The swarm presses tighter the closer I get, their hands clawing against wire in jerking rhythm, teeth snapping inches from the metal. I step slowly, pressing each boot into cracked concrete, my body moving like I've been one of them my entire life. Slack, low, deliberate. For the first few feet, it works. The infected closest to me press against the fence, their jaws gnashing blindly at the night, but none break posture to turn. I keep moving, weaving through scattered shadows, blending with the stench. The smell clogs my throat, makes my stomach twist, but I force it down. When I reach the wire, I crouch and scan for weakness. The bottom coil is loose, pulled outward where someone forced a gap earlier. The strands are still jagged, clotted with old cloth and dried stains, where the last person who tried this didn't make it far. I test the gap with one hand, enough space to crawl if I stay low. That's when the sound changes. Behind me, the stairwell door slams open, metal crashing against the wall, and the echoes rip through the service corridor like thunder. The swarm inside has found the stairwell. Their groans pour out instantly, sharp, urgent, echoing toward me in a wave. I drop flat, shove my pack through the gap, and force my shoulders under the lowest strand. Razor wire snags my jacket, tearing fabric, but I twist sideways until I slip halfway through. The roar of the infected grows louder behind me, dozens pouring into the corridor, their footsteps a chaotic hammering. The fence swarm stirs too, pressing harder against the coils inches from my face, their mouths opening wide, teeth snapping at air as I crawl beneath them. The disguise holds. They don't recognize me. But if I hesitate for a second longer, I'll be pinned between two swarms. I drag myself forward, scraping along torn concrete until I burst through to the outer side. My jacket tears fully free of the wire, leaving strips of cloth behind as I roll onto the service road. I grab my pack, scramble upright, and sprint into the open night. The fence behind me rattles violently as the swarm inside collides with it, their bodies crashing against metal in a deafening wave. Their groans rise into a chorus that shivers along the length of the wire, hundreds hammering in unison. The road ahead stretches dark and endless, lined with cracked asphalt and the skeletal remains of street lamps that haven't glowed in months. To the north, faint outlines of buildings rise against the horizon, hollow shells of a city long drowned. To the south, the road disappears into blackness, no markers, no promise. I stop just long enough to catch one last look back at the airport. The towers rise pale against the sky, glass fractured, terminals gutted, runways littered with frozen aircraft that will never fly again. For months, I lived in that place, convincing myself it was safe, that silence and walls made it a shelter. But standing here now, I see it for what it is, a graveyard, one I barely crawled out of alive. The groans pound against the fence behind me, rattling steel, but none break through. Not yet. I turn away, pull the pistol from my belt, and start walking down the road. My steps are unsteady, but they're forward. I don't know what waits beyond the dark horizon. More dead, more silence, or something worse. But it's not the tower. It's not the endless waiting. It's not that glass coffin. I keep walking until the sound of the swarm fades into the night, until the only noise left is the wind across the empty road and the faint scrape of my boots on cracked asphalt. My body reeks, my throat's raw, my stomach's empty, but I'm moving. For the first time in 120 days, I'm moving somewhere that isn't circles inside a cage. And if I die out here, at least it'll be in motion, not rotting behind glass, not waiting for rescue that never comes. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.